Thanks for that introduction, Loic. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Adrian Monck, as advertised, from the World Economic Forum. The Forum's got a keen interest in all things media, especially with our Technology Pioneers program. I also happen to be a professor of journalism, and for any of those of you who are not familiar with academic hierarchies, that puts me just above the guy who teaches physical education and just below the woodwork teacher. But for this panel, very lucky to have with us Gabe Rivera, who's founder of news aggregator Techmeme. The New York Times says it's the first site that Silicon Valley residents reach for each morning. Pierre Chappaz, founder and CEO of social media group Wikio. Julio Alonso, who started Weblog SL, which is a blog network that spans the Spanish-speaking world. He's a keen advocate of net neutrality. And of course, Ben Rooney, who's a pioneer of online news in the UK with telegraph.co.uk and is now the tech editor at Wall Street Journal Europe. All of them have plenty to say, but I wanted to start with an apology, really. We're being a little old school here. We wanted to devote this media panel to talking about something that isn't trending on Twitter, which is Wikileaks. Some of you might be thinking, if it isn't trending on Twitter, it can't be that important, but bear with all of us. This isn't the platform, of course, to talk about the personal life of its founder, Julian Assange, who's currently in a British jail in connection with claims that might struggle to make a paragraph in Keith Richards' recent autobiography. But just to remind you, in case you needed it, after 5 years of leaking documents, among them material related to killings in Kenya, which won them an Amnesty Award, WikiLeaks released US diplomatic cables and has subsequently found itself dropped by every DNS, dumped by Amazon from its cloud, restricted by Visa and MasterCard and PayPal, and under threat from the US, Australian, and the French governments. So my first question is, has what's happened to WikiLeaks, is it a concern for you, and what are the implications for you and what you do? And the first person I'm going to turn to, because his network is seen across Latin America and Spain, is Julio. So Julio, what does this mean for you?
Okay, thanks. First, I'd like to say I'm happy to be in a panel where there's old media and new media, and we're not talking about the difference in between the two, or whether there's going to be paywalls, and we're talking about something that's, I think, more substantial and more important. I mean, the first thing is, we've always had leaks. And we've always had information that was protected by someone and uncovered by someone who basically gave it to the press or discovered by the press. Right? Actually, there's an old saying that news is something that someone doesn't want you to know. Right? So the WikiLeaks phenomena is not new. It has a different form. And obviously, not everyone's going to agree with everything that they've done. But I think more than talking about the actual leaks and how what picture of our governments it gives, I think it's more interesting to look at what's happening after that. And I'm very honestly appealed by the amount of resistance, the amount of fight back that we've seen. I mean, how a number of companies have been pushed into not helping WikiLeaks, whether it's Amazon, whether it's PayPal, whether it's the credit card companies.
Do you think they're being pushed into that, or do you think they're doing it of their own volition?
I wouldn't say there's someone with a gun pointed to their head saying, you do that or I should. However, and obviously I don't have proofs for this, but I think it's very clear that there's been some level of pressure, whether it's informal, formal, or whether it's self-imposed. I wouldn't be able to say which is which. I mean, we've seen some of that early this morning with the PayPal guy on the stage. I think it was Assange who said that part of this was helping us see what are the weakest elements in the chain. So what are the elements in the internet platform as a whole that are more subject or more vulnerable to outside pressures, right? And it tends to be those elements that are centralized and that are not replicated and they're not redundant, right? So it's also a call for everyone to say, okay, what are the elements that you're using and how proved is your service against this kind of situations, right? I totally feel that this is a turning point for the internet. It's not just about WikiLeaks anymore. It's about whether and if you are in U.S. legal terms, it's First Amendment. If you are on other legal environments, it's freedom of press or freedom of speech. Who puts the limits and how those limits get executed? And whatever happens to Wikileaks is going to get applied to a lot more organizations later on.
Pierre, Chappaz, does this make you nervous about your own web hosting in this case?
Not especially about my own web hosting, but I'm happy to see that Julio and myself, and I wish many people in the room feel the same. We feel that this is a defining time for the future of the internet. What is happening now, I wrote a post on my blog defining it as an info war. This is the first global attempt of censorship at the global level against internet. And this attempt is made by all the governments of the planet.
Is that fair? Because other people have tried to... Other people have done a pretty good job of trying to censor the internet.
By the way, could we ask the people in the room if they want to give their thoughts? I have created a new hashtag on Twitter, which is Wikileaks LeWeb. And the question I would like you to answer, so that we know what you feel, is, are the actions of the governments against Wikileaks legitimate or not? Please go on Twitter and give us your opinion.
Yeah, I don't think that will trend anytime soon, though, frankly, Pierre, sorry. You said you think it's the first shot in the sort of global information war. Is that really fair? I mean, haven't we seen attempts by governments in the Middle East, in Southeast Asia? I mean, we've seen a lot of governments trying to shut down the internet in their particular domains. But you said this is the first sort of global...
This is the first global attempt to... we could imagine a situation where the global internet, hopefully, internet has been built to resist a nuclear war, you know? So despite all these attacks by CIA, hackers against WikiLeaks sites, closing of their wikileaks.org and many other domain names, insane attacks against Assange on his personal life. Despite all this, I'm optimistic. I think that the information will survive because of all the people on the planet that defend the freedom of information. But just imagine that the governments win. If they would win, if they would eliminate not only WikiLeaks, but the possibility to disseminate information that is annoying them on the internet, we would end up in an internet which would be like in China.
Gabe, I just want to come to you and say, you know, I'm not going to put you on the spot and say as the US representative here, but one of the things that's come out of this is just how important the US is in supporting the infrastructure of the internet. You look at something like every DNS taking away hosting, you look at PayPal. Do you think this is going to cast a shadow over, you know, US leadership online? It's going to have people asking questions about the US's preeminent role, if you like, underpinning what was the open society online?
I believe so. Judging from this crowd and the tone I picked up and from what I read, I think so. Something to see how the extent of this, how far it's gone. Yesterday, Senator Lieberman suggested that even the New York Times itself could be a target of investigation, urging the Justice Department to look into what they did. And it underscores that there's really no essential difference between what WikiLeaks is doing and what New York Times does. I mean, there are many differences, but fundamentally, there's so much in common that we all have something to be concerned about.
Ben, we're all concerned in this room probably about technology and the media. Are we getting overexcited about WikiLeaks? Is this something that is just an elite concern or a marginal concern and the rest of the population are happily ignoring?
I'm not sure that the rest of the population is ignoring it. I think they're quite enjoying it, actually. because there's nothing we like more than catching the leaders with their trousers down. And let's be honest, they've been caught with their trousers down. I think that just like to pick up on a point that Julio made about the structure of the internet, and I think that is an interesting area because I forget who it was who said that the internet treats censorship as a fault and will root round it. And I think what we've had here is we've pushed that theory right to the very edge. And obviously, the taking out the DNS records was a very significant move and has revealed a pretty weak point on the internet. So going forward, I think there are areas that the internet as a whole, if such a thing ever existed, has to consider quite carefully.
I don't need one of those. I've got one of these on. Can I just come back to you, Pierre, and say, if this is a global information war, then what are the defensive measures that someone like you is going to have to take in order to safeguard your social media network?
The first thing is we have to speak about what's happening. I'm amazed by the silence of the traditional media. They say, in a short article, yeah, eBay has cut them. MasterCard has cut them. Visa also. But there is no global, I have not seen a global article analyzing what is happening, which is a systematic attack on all aspects possible, even thinkable, to push them out of the internet. So the first thing we have to do, because we understand what's happening, is explain to the traditional media that they have to defend Wikileaks because this is the stakes are about the free press. If Wikileaks is liquidated, then the liberty of the press will be liquidated as well. Because how could you criminalize Wikileaks for disseminating these documents and not the New York Times or Le Monde in this country or Der Spiegel in Germany, who have taken this information and distributed this information to their readers? Wikileaks is a part of this media landscape, is a media entity, and deserves the same kind of protection as the press. So I think first thing we have to do is obviously explain, speak about it. Second thing is many people are creating mirror sites, and it's certainly a good thing, obviously. Now, helping them financially is more difficult because you have noticed that even their Swiss bank account has been closed. And to tell you the truth, I'm ready to give them some money. If I do that, will I end up on a blacklist of the CIA?
You don't look at me when you say that. I get very nervous.
Let me complement Pierre's answer.
Pick up on that.
I think the first line of defense is speaking about it and explain it to everyone why it's important and trying to get the traditional media to understand how it is important also for them. I think the second line of defense is creating mechanisms to root around censorship. So if out of the problem with the DNS system comes out an alternative DNS system based on P2P that's decentralized and that is more resilient to censorship, that'll be a very appropriate response to that part. If out of this come different payment solutions that are not subject to this kind of mechanisms, it'll also be building a more robust and censor-proofed internet. But that's part of what we have to take out of this and build together.
I think the architecture of the internet will ensure that this is a war that ultimately will not be lost to the leakers. I mean, we've seen these, there are 700 mirror sites now. WikiLeaks continues publishing on Twitter, and there's torrent files out there. And even if their Twitter account was deleted, Twitter's never said they'll absolutely keep it. If their Twitter account goes away, they could still pop up in so many other places. Facebook said something reassuring today to WikiLeaks. But there's just too many potential co-publishers, too many leakers out there, and too many people with information to leak. It's many actors, distributed system. The leakers will win.
Ben, that's an optimistic appraisal from Gabe, but I mean, isn't the reality that actually what we've seen is that you can marginalize this kind of information and that you can push it to one side? I mean, if you look back at the Kenyan story that Wikileaks broke a year or so ago, it wasn't until that story got traction in the British Sunday Times and then globally that actually it took off in any sort of way. The leak was out there online, but nobody was really paying attention to it. So you're being offered a little chocolate here.
It's some Belgium chocolate.
Oh, very nice. Not Swiss. Okay, I'll grab one of those. So, do you share that optimism, or do you think actually there's a reason to be more circumspect?
No, I do. I thoroughly share the optimism because I think that this sort of game of international whack-a-mole that's being played at the moment is ultimately futile. And we've seen the reaction. It's like chopping the head off the hydra. Every time you cut one off, 3 more will grow in its place. So ultimately, they are bound to fail. And I think Julio's point about changes to the structure, so moving from the DNS system into a P2P network, is exactly the way to cut again to mitigate against things like this. So I think I'm extremely optimistic, and I mean clearly one of the issues that governments are doing is by putting pressure on WikiLeaks, they are of course sending a message to the people who would be leaking. And they're saying, well, you might want to think about this, which is a very paradoxical position because certainly in the UK, for example, there is official policy on having mechanisms that allow leaking allow whistleblowing to take place. So there's this very sort of paradoxical position that governments are finding themselves in. But ultimately, no, I'm very optimistic about it.
Adrian, I'm sorry, I actually came to give you chocolates. Also, a quick announcement. I've bad and good news. We lost 2 speakers in the snow, 3 speakers in the snow. The good news is Dennis Crowley is coming back with Leo Laporte. So after the panel, we'll do some more fun together with Dennis. Sorry for interruption.
No problem. And I should have said that Ken Estenson did send apologies. He's stuck with a couple of huskies in a snowdrift somewhere in central Paris, we believe. To move over to Julio and Pierre again. I mean, you guys both are on the publishing side, putting out stuff that potentially could contain material that falls into the category WikiLeaks have fallen into. You talk about the need to have kind of mechanisms in place, but realistically, we're talking about a kind of governance regime that looks like probably Europe in the 1500s in terms of global governance, global standards online. What kind of organization could actually step up and say, we're going to offer some standards that offer protection? Is there such an organization? Is there such a place or a space that you could say and point to with some kind of hope that might protect you?
I'm more a believer in auto-regulation of the internet. And I believe that what we see today is the importance of the blogosphere and social networks, Twitter, to resist what is happening. So I think there's a fundamental reason to be optimistic about the freedom of speech in the future is that internet is a living media which auto-regulates itself, which is in the hands of people who want to express their views freely.
Can we just get a sense, sort of in the room, of how optimistic people are? I mean, is the general sense that, sharing the panelists' views, that WikiLeaks, you can't keep a good, weird organization down, or that this is actually potentially a nail in the coffin of free speech? I mean, who's optimistic that leaking can and will continue and go from strength to strength despite what's going on? Can we have a quick look? And who's thinking that this could be a nail in the coffin and that they're a little worried and pessimistic about where this is headed? Okay, so the skeptical pessimists are definitely in the minority in the audience.
Adrian, you might need to differentiate between WikiLeaks and leakers in general because WikiLeaks they're facing a number of significant challenges now, but
I was going to say, to be optimistic or pessimistic is a bit of a simplified take on it.
I'm a journalist, so I have to do everything simple.
No, sorry,
for me.
but no. What I mean is, from my point of view, I'm confident that there are mechanisms to go around it, but I'm also pessimist in the way that bringing that kind of information into the public is going to be a lot more difficult and a lot more challenging in the future, because we're going to face resistance at every step. I mean, in our case, and we're not we don't have a lot of publication center on the political side of news, but every week or every couple of weeks, we're getting cease and desist letters. We're getting angry companies calling us because they don't want how we cover their product. We're getting people saying we are going to retire the advertising from your publications because you covered us or because you didn't cover us or whatever. I only see this increasing as they also see the governments acting the same way, right? I don't think that's going to close us or anyone else, but I think it's going to give us a much of a harder time than that we're having up to now.
But I think, I just want to pick up on that, because I think that, I mean, that's always been the case. People have always tried to close down, if you write a kind of story about someone and they get wind of it, people have always tried to do this. So I don't think there's anything particularly special about the internet or publishing online or things like that. Essentially, you write stuff that upsets people, guess what? They get upset.
But Ben, I mean, has any, in your memory as a journalist, of the people who deliver the Wall Street Journal's newspapers said we're not going to deliver them anymore, and you've got 24 hours to find someone else to truck them round? I mean, these are the kind of issues that newspapers maybe had to face back in the 1920s or maybe the dawn of the 20th century, but we haven't seen recently anyone trying to shut down the New York Times in that way.
No, but there have been cases where, for example, magazines have been threatened by UK stationers saying we're not going to put your magazine on the stall because of on the newsstand because of a certain article or because of an action that they've taken. So as I say, these are old problems that are surfacing in a new way. And I think one of the fantastic things about what we have seen and an audience like this is the ingenuity with which people get round those issues. And that's why I remain very optimistic about our ability to tackle them. I'm not understating either the complexity or the severity of the issues, but I am optimistic that we will find ways around.
In a moment, I wouldn't mind just taking some questions from the floor, but Gabe, if I can just ask you, you mentioned Facebook. I mean, I think the WikiLeaks page has now got over 1 million likes, which puts it heading towards CNN at 1.5 million. I mean, is anyone coming out of this particular story with their head held higher than was previously expected, or have very few people really stepped up to the plate, in your opinion, looking at it?
Like high ground.
Yeah.
Well, I think the publications that have gone along with WikiLeaks are held in considerable esteem by a lot of people. There's opinion will always be split, but they're being commended and they're also profiting. They're extra attention, and that's definitely another side to this that will encourage more people to be co-publishers with WikiLeaks and organizations like that.
Are you a little disappointed that it seems to have been old media that's made the running in picking up these stories? I mean, it's been the New York Times, it's been the Guardian in the UK, founded in 1826 or something. I mean, these are not freshly minted online publications.
Yeah, I think the new publications will, they'll have their day. These institutions had a lot of resources, a lot of people and experts to pick these files over, and I can see why they were leaked to them. Of course, Assange probably considered these publications also friendlier to his philosophy and ideology than other publications in these countries, but they had their experts and they put them to use.
Can I get a sense from our audience of who'd like to put a question into the panel? Gentleman up there, I think, and forgive me. If we can get a microphone to you, or you to a microphone.
That's going to be me.
Ah, okay, apologies. Yeah, it's okay.
Questions?
This is great.
Yes, I'm coming. Easy.
I like the new guy with the microphone. He looks enthusiastic.
There you go. I could have gone down.
Cheers,
Good
mate.
evening. Good evening. My name's Terrence Daniel. I wanted to pose a more general question. I've heard a lot of people defending WikiLeaks, and as a publication, I would defend WikiLeaks' right and ability to publish. However, I think in previous years and previous times, if something was of national interest or could harm the, let's say, national security of the country, a country can go to a newspaper and require them not to publish. This particular leak wasn't whistleblowing, and it wasn't something really of necessity. It was more really something of availability. And I understand the United States' desire and need to want to suppress the information, though clearly it's too late and there's no point in even trying at this point. But I think perhaps they want to discourage WikiLeaks as a medium for doing things like this, because if you imagine any spy or any dissatisfied person in any government anywhere in the world now has a mechanism by which, without any kind of ramification, potentially, they can get information out into the public sphere that can damage or irreparably harm a government and its people. The United States or Europe, Western democracies are very sensitive balance of information. The freedom of the press requires that really as much information is brought out on a specific subject. A government like China is not the same thing. So my question really is, I don't think that you can equate every country.
I think I sense where your question's heading. You're talking about legitimacy, really, aren't you? I mean, I guess what we're saying is should a different rule apply to democracies because they have democratic legitimacy and because they have to go through a process in order to elect their executives? And should we cut them some slack in that case in terms of protecting their national interest? How do you respond to that argument, Julio? Do you think we should have a different standard for liberal democracies to the rest of the world, or are we sort of defacing our own values by not standing up for them?
I think those differences between countries were clear to me before this, and they're blurring a lot. I mean, I think the Western democracies have lost a lot of their moral stature when they're going to go and say to China or Cuba or whatever, you shouldn't censor this, because they're going to go back and say, well, you did the same thing. Another thing is, with some of the cables being leaked, what we're seeing is government doing exactly the opposite to what they told their voters, or telling the U.S. something and doing something else in the local market. So, in a way, what this is proving is that they're not as clear, clean, democratic, and following the desires or the mandate of their voters, right?
But what they would say surely is, we do have voters and they can kick us out if they decide that they don't like what we've done to WikiLeaks.
No, in terms of are the regimes the same? No, they're not. In terms of do they have a very different position when it comes to censoring information? It used to be very different. I'm starting to think it's not that different. I don't know if that clarifies a bit.
Gabe, what do you make of that point, that actually, these are legitimately constituted, elected governments? They have to have some kind of process for dealing with foreign policy, and in this particular case, it's perfectly legitimate for them to act to try and put the cat in the bag.
I don't think anyone can look over the entirety of what was leaked and agree with what happened. There were pieces of information that made things more made vulnerable targets more, vulnerable, more identifiable, both people and other things. And yeah, a lot of the diplomatic cables didn't seem to be of, the argument that they'd be of value to like the citizens to know is dubious for some of them. But that points to the issue of if you were WikiLeaks, would you do it differently? I think most people would say yes. And of course, there's a lot of things about WikiLeaks and Assange that concern people. But I think the reason why there's so much concern and support for WikiLeaks is just because of the reaction, just because of all the strange things that have happened. Government pressuring, U.S. government pressuring companies to act a certain way without due process.
Ben, certainly the Secretary of State Hillary Clinton made a big public stand on the US and the importance of an open society. And certainly in terms of technology, we've seen in terms of Iran, for example, a lot of support by people for the idea that technology is going to open up the world politically and it's going to open new doors. Do you think that is all going to take a massive, overwhelming hit from what's happened now, or is there a point of recovery for that position for the US?
Oh, without a doubt, it takes a hit. Yeah, without a doubt. I think Hillary Clinton, if we contrast the actions of the US government now with the statements that the US government was making earlier in the year, I would guess that Hillary Clinton feels slightly uncomfortable in the position that she's found herself in. I keep coming back to the same point about which is really a statement of optimism about our abilities to deal with these things, and it's really about a statement of optimism about humankind and our ability to find ways round problems. This is a problem, yes, without a doubt. But as I say, I come back to it that I am extremely optimistic that these things, when the next time this happens, we will do it in a different way. And so I think, to pick up Julio and Pierre's point about the reaction, it is, what do you know? The reaction to a problem is always seems to end up as being far bigger than the actual problem itself. And here we are in exactly the same position. And I was thinking, as we were talking about this, about other great leak stories and what's happened on those. And the only one I can think of, which is of a similar, well, it's not of a similar scale because it's not international, but a big national story was the leaking of information about MPs' expenses in the United Kingdom. And basically, everyone was delighted that all this information was leaked, and they thought this was a terribly good thing. And the person who leaked it didn't go to jail. And in fact, as a result of it, all sorts of changes were brought in. So, as again, I come back to maybe I'm just some sort of naive, kind of like skipping along with a balloon in my hand, optimist about all of these things. But I retain my optimism.
Pierre, Julio.
I would like to add one point. We are still in democracy. And in democracy, there is a justice. So I'm very interested to see what the justice will say, because it's not proved at all that WikiLeaks has done anything illegal. Because leaking secrets is illegal. And what's his name? Bradley Manning is in jail for his entire life, probably. But disseminating leaks is not illegal. So I think it's the next step, which is very important in all countries, and it will be a kind of measurement of, let's say, the democratic maturity of our countries, will be to see what is the position of the justice. In this country, in France, for instance, the Ministry of Internet was very famous. It was very famous because his previous responsibility in the government was Minister of Immigrants, and his main activity was to pull them out. This minister asked the new hosting facility of WikiLeaks, which is OTC, to cut them off, saying this is illegal, cut them off. The hosting company asked to the justice, what do you say, justice? And the justice says, well, up to now, we don't see anything illegal. So I hope that the justice will play its role.
I was going to add, I don't think this is going to stop the leaks. All this discussion about the reaction against WikiLeaks and all that we're going to get this week and next week, which is about the Assange being in jail and then the charges and whether they're true or not, they're basically constructing a screen and they're having everyone talking about that and not talking about the actual content of the leaks, which is what's relevant, right? And in a way, if the forces behind this succeed in having us talking about only this and not the content of the of the cables, because at the end of the day, there are some cables where there's things that are plainly wrong and that deserve that things get changed. Now, are we going to talk about that? Are we going to see any change on those things? Or are we just going to talk about the whether in Sweden you should wear or not condoms all the time?
Just the last point, because we're nearly out of time, for all of you very quickly. I mean, what does this do for the debate around net neutrality? I know, Julio, you're a very keen advocate in its favor. Does this strengthen your case, or does it give it a setback?
I think it makes it the more obvious how important it is and how critical it is, not just for news organizations, but in general for innovation on the internet, that we have a level play field, that we don't have players in the middle that can discriminate or cut, whether it's for commercial reasons or for political pressure or for whatever it is. I mean, having someone being able to create a service, put it on the net, and instantly being accessible by anyone who's also on the net without people in the middle having any impact on whether that service is provided or not is what's making this industry go so fast and grow so big. And we should defend that.
Ben?
I think that, just really to echo that point, I think that, what this has shown is, first of all, the centrality of the internet in modern political discourse and how important it is, and as a result of that, what an absolutely vital asset it is, and therefore how we have to protect it. And I'm encouraged, I'm reasonably encouraged by some of the utterances that Neelie Kroes has been making, although maybe she could have gone a bit further on some of them, about the importance of net neutrality. And I think Europe is... I get the impression that Europe is relatively speaking quite clear on this and the importance of essentially of a neutral net.
Gabe, what's your feeling? Does this hurt or help net neutrality?
Well, I think in the U.S., usually when net neutrality is discussed, it very often had to do with video transmission, the bits, whether bits belong to like video or the rest of the internet. But a broader, for a broader definition of net neutrality, definitely, I think this will affect the debate on issues from like what happens in China to this to the blocking that was proposed in Australia, and extending to some of the legislation considered in the U.S. about blocking sites that link to pirated content.
Very, very quickly. So right
I think the internet is the most democratic tool that has ever been created in the human history, but it happened by chance. So it went out of control from the powers and also from the economic powers. So obviously we are entering a phase where they try to catch up. The telcos try to catch up with the net neutrality debate. You know what they have in mind. And the governments are doing the same. But it may be too late, because the internet is now so strong that I believe they will have a hard time putting it under control.
A very optimistic close to that session. Ladies and gentlemen, please thank our panelists.